In a packed federal courtroom, Chief Justice John Roberts delivered his ruling with measured authority, announcing a hefty fine of $200,000 against Representative Jasmine Crockett. The courtroom fell silent as the words echoed, the weight of the fine hitting like a hammer. Jasmine, however, didn't flinch. She calmly rose from her seat, adjusted her microphone, and with a steady voice began addressing the court. She thanked the Chief Justice for his time, then launched into an eloquent and piercing explanation of why the fine was unjust, unconstitutional, and, as she put it, an affront not just to me, but to every citizen watching this unfold. Jasmine's words were sharp but respectful. She reminded the court that public servants like herself were not above accountability, but neither were they tools to be silenced or punished for political convenience. She recited passages from the Federalist Papers, invoked constitutional clauses, and quoted landmark Supreme Court cases, all without a single note in front of her. Reporters in the gallery exchanged glances, realizing they were witnessing something rare. She wasn't begging for mercy, she was making a case, forceful and brilliant, explaining how the fine set a dangerous precedent that threatened the balance between the branches of government. Chief Justice Roberts leaned forward slightly, his fingers stippled, watching her carefully. He had expected protest or defiance, but Jasmine's approach was something entirely different. She laid out how the fine overstepped judicial authority, encroaching on legislative immunity protected under the speech or debate clause. She argued how such financial penalties, levied without due process, could chill political discourse and undermine democratic accountability. She spoke not just as a defendant, but as a constitutional scholar, weaving her argument through layers of legal history, current doctrine, and civic responsibility. The courtroom was riveted by her clarity. Jasmine's voice never wavered. She spoke of the trust placed in public servants, the dangers of judicial overreach, and the moral responsibility every officeholder bears to speak up when institutions are misused. She did not once make it personal, even as she stood personally under the weight of a life-changing fine. Instead, she elevated the conversation, focusing on the precedent, the people, and the principles at stake. As she continued, Roberts' expression subtly shifted. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed in focus, and he exchanged brief, pointed glances with the clerk seated beside him. Clearly, he hadn't expected to be put on the defensive. When Jasmine finished, she stepped back quietly. The silence in the room was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Chief Justice Roberts cleared his throat, clearly grappling with the weight of what had just been laid before him. He began to speak but paused, then leaned back for a long moment. Finally, he looked Jasmine in the eye and said, "Representative Crockett, your arguments have given this court a great deal to consider." His voice cracked slightly, and not with weakness, but with the gravity of realizing that perhaps, just perhaps, the court had overreached, and the person before him was right. Outside the courtroom, news spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with clips of Jasmine's remarks, headlines exploded across the internet, and legal analysts scrambled to dissect what had happened. Some called it a masterclass in constitutional defense, others called it a landmark moment of civil courage. Jasmine, meanwhile, kept her focus. She walked calmly past the cameras, declining interviews for the moment, offering only a simple statement: "This is about the people, not me." Inside, Chief Justice Roberts remained seated long after the room had cleared, his mind swirling with the uncomfortable realization that Jasmine had exposed a crack in the court's armor. The $200,000 fine, while still formally standing, began to tremble under the public and legal pressure building in the days that followed. Prominent legal scholars issued open letters questioning the court's actions. Bipartisan groups of lawmakers voiced concern, and even some judges began quietly signaling that the matter was more complex than the initial ruling suggested. Jasmine remained measured in her public comments, emphasizing the importance of process and reform over personal vindication. She met with legal teams, advised constituents, and kept her head down, knowing the larger fight was still unfolding, and not just for her, but for institutional integrity. Behind closed doors, Roberts reportedly wrestled with the fallout. Colleagues noted his uncharacteristic silence, his long pauses during meetings, and his growing preoccupation with the questions Jasmine had raised. He began revisiting case notes, reviewing precedents, consulting scholars, trying to understand how the court had arrived at a moment where it might have failed its own constitutional responsibilities. Quietly, Roberts arranged for private discussions with key legal minds, seeking counsel not on how to save face, but on how to correct course. Jasmine's words had done something few could. They had pierced the armor of judicial authority itself. In the weeks that followed, Roberts issued a rare public statement acknowledging the need for judicial humility and the importance of respecting constitutional boundaries. While the fine's legal status remained pending, the tone of the national conversation had shifted dramatically. Jasmine became a symbol not of rebellion, but of principled resistance, a reminder that even the highest courts must answer to the Constitution they serve. She was invited to speak at universities, featured in major interviews, and praised by both allies and fair-minded opponents as someone who had upheld the dignity of her office and the strength of the rule of law. And so, the moment that began with a crushing fine ended with something much larger, a reckoning within the highest levels of American justice. Jasmine Crockett's fearless, brilliant defense had left not just Chief Justice Roberts, but an entire nation, reconsidering the delicate balance between power and principle. Roberts, in private moments, was said to have been moved nearly to tears by the honesty and clarity of her challenge, a rare reminder that the law is not just a tool of authority, but a living promise of fairness, bound by the voices brave enough to stand up and speak when it matters most.